be talking for the definitions for pedophilia before we end into the conversation, right? So,
Yes,
Westbound,
being
what's your
attracted to
definition of
underage
a pedophile?
girls. Being attracted to
Underage
underage
girls,
girls.
and when you say underage, what specifically are you talking about there?
Wait, let me announce
Girls
it. Give me
under
a
the
second.
age of 18.
Okay, cool. So, just to be clear, is it the case that you have been attracted to underage girls previously in your life? Have you been attracted to someone who's younger than 18?
Okay, when you're 18 or older, when you're of the majority,
So now you
and
change
you're
the
attracted to
definition.
girls that are
Change
under
the definition
18.
from being attracted.
Well, no,
Stop
I
playing the music.
refined
Stop playing
my
the music. Stop playing the
definition.
music. Kick the recording bot. Kick the recording bot. Right. So just to be
Okay,
clear,
keep
this right.
the recording
You
bot.
said
Like I don't.
specifically, you said originally that being attracted to underage girls makes a
Okay,
pedophile.
while
But
being
given your own
18.
definition, you're a pedophile. Given your own
Okay,
definition, you're a
okay,
pedophile.
congratulations.
You're
I
changing the
changed my
definition
definition.
right now from being
Okay,
attracted
we're
to
trying
underage
to
girls to
find a
being attracted to
definition.
underage
So
girls while being
by
18 years
bringing up
old.
a good point, I can refine my
I
definition. I
buy
don't
your
care.
own logic. You're a pedophile. That's the whole point of the argument here.
Oh my God. Okay,
Retarded.
if you're 18 and you're attracted to
But that
girls
wasn't
that are
in the
under the
original
age of
definition. You
18, then
agree
you're a
with this, right? That
pedophile.
was not in the original definition.
Okay, well I'm telling you,
Okay, so you agree that was not in the original
implicated
definition.
within
So
my
I see your
definition.
point.
I didn't know I had to make it so clear for you.
So hold on,
Right?
just to
If I
be
didn't
clear on
say
this,
it verbatim,
let's
hold
say
on.
we have
If
an
I didn't say
18,
it verbatim,
or let's say we have an
it
18-year-old
is
who's
hold on,
attracted.
hold on, hold on. It
I'm going to
is
ask you
an
a question.
entailment of my
Retard,
argument due to the fact that
retard. I'm
hold
going to ask you a
on,
question.
for it to be
If
some
you have
sort
an
of
eight, if you
immoral
have an
thing,
18-year-old
clearly,
person,
yeah, you
you
would
have an
have to be
eight.
like
He's
18 or
running.
older, and then
He's
just like
running. He's
there would have
running.
to be some
He's
problem with it.
running.
And the
He
problem
knows
with
the
that
analogy I'm going to
would be
give
that
to
you
you.
have this inverse relationship with them. You
Just to be clear,
absolute idiot.
Westbound, I have a
So yes,
question for you.
so yes,
Westbound, stop
if you are
yapping.
18 or
Stop yapping,
older
Westbound.
and you
Westbound,
hold on, if you're
stop.
18 or
Stop.
older and you
Westbound,
like
you're
girls that are
distracted with the
underage,
conversation. Stop. Stop,
oh my God.
Westbound, relax.
Wait,
So
okay,
if
wait, hold on,
there's a
wait.
case,
Let me just give.
if there's a
Let me
case
give a second.
scenario, if there's a case scenario in which you have an 18-year-old person who is attracted to a girl who is 17 years old and 364 days old, is that person a pedophile given your own definition?
I mean, probably.
You think genuinely speaking, like people are gonna say,
All
yeah, you're a
right, let me stop.
pedophile
Okay,
being one dating
hold on.
someone who's just
Unironically,
to be
hold on.
clear, just to be
Unironically,
clear,
if we're just
do you
gonna
think
hold
there are
on.
case scenarios in
Unironically,
which do you
if
think
we're
there are
just hold
case
on. If
scenarios
we're
in
just
which
gonna
dating
refine
someone who's
definitions, hold on. If
two
we're just
days
gonna
younger than
refine
you is going to qualify
definitions.
as pedophilia?
Oh my
Wait,
God.
just to be
If we're
clear,
just
just give
gonna
you an example.
refine
Wait, hold on. If you
definitions,
have an
hold
18-year-old
on. All
person
right, bro.
who's
I
two
was
days older,
trolling. I
stop
was
interrupting
trolling.
me. Stop interrupting me,
I
retard.
was
Stop
trolling. I'm
interrupting me.
giving
He's
you my
scared. He
actual
knows for a
answer.
fact this point is
I
fake.
Wait,
was
can you
giving
guys
you my
like
Westbound,
take
actual
stop
like a few
talking.
answer.
seconds real quick
Westbound,
just to like
Yanni,
stop
could you
talking?
moderate
I
this
gotta
I
guy?
go.
was
Okay,
giving
Yanni,
wait,
you
could
I
you
the
wanna
moderate this
moderate the
actual
conversation?
answer.
conversation.
Because
Holy
he
shit.
interrupts every single time because he's
I
scared of
was
the
giving
actual
an
argument.
actual.
Okay,
No,
Apollo,
you're
finish your
not
response.
giving an actual argument, and you're interrupting my right. So what I'm saying here specifically, that if you have an 18-year-old person who is 2 days older than someone who's 17 years old and 364 days old, is it going to be the case that that person is going to be a pedophile for dating the person who's 2 days younger, just 2 days younger?
Alright, let me unmute Westbound.
Answer the
I
question, yes
told
or no.
you I was trolling with my response. Was I muted during that? You fucking
Yeah, I
retard.
had to mute you because
Sure.
otherwise it would be like not fair.
I was explaining what I was
I know,
saying. I
just well,
said
please,
5 times. Oh my
just
God.
explain now. Just explain it to now. Explain it now. Like,
Okay, yeah. Well, again, then we can just refine the definition like to account for this. Sure, if it has to be some sort of substantial gap such that uh there's either one some sort of power dynamic presented within the relationship, uh two, some obviously substantive age gap within well, I guess you could say legally speaking, whether or not they're able to consent, whether or not their brain is considered to be developed by society. So, if we look at these multiple different cases, we can either see that one, uh, it's just the case that yeah, that person is a pedophile. They probably shouldn't be talking to these people because they are not considered to be adults by society. Two, they are like significantly older than this person. The relevance is important just through the stages of development. So there would be some sort of power dynamic, whether it be environmentally speaking, you respect your elders, within a position of I guess power, like you're a senior, they're a freshman, they're going to look up to seniors. There's obviously some sort of immoral abuse of power given within that situation. Um, and then the third one, it can just be the case that this person wants to, I guess, it would be immoral for this person to talk to an underage girl if uh, they would just be like under the age of consent within some given region, legally speaking.
Westbound,
okay,
you guys, part of believing you.
bro, shut the fuck up. Gosh, man, I'm joking. Sorry.
Okay, so just to be Westbound after he's done talking. Thank you.
Of course, of course, of course.
Just to be clear for the audience, so he changed his definition 2 times, and even people who are not even on my side agree with this. The first definition is given for what determines pedophilia is just being attracted to minors. Then I asked him specifically, is it going to be the case that you've ever been attracted to minors in the past? He said yes. He actually agreed on this, and then he changed his definition from just being attracted to minors being determinant pedophilia to being attracted to minors while being 18 or above. Now, given that definition, he has to then agree that someone who is 18 years old or above dating someone who is like 2 days younger than them, who is below 18, is going to be something which qualifies that person as being a pedophile. But then clearly that's not going to be the case given his own definition or given his own intuitions. So he then changed his definitions again, right? The new definition he's now given, and which determines pedophilia after he conceded the first two definitions being erroneous and so forth, mapping onto the concept, is that there has to be a substantive age gap. Well, that sounds really subjective and vague, right? What determines a substantive age gap? You think 2 years age gap is going to qualify as substantive age gap? We've seen multiple case scenarios in which parents, for example, like a lot of our parents, there's a much larger age gap than this 3 years, for example. For example, there we see plenty of case scenarios in which parents have an age gap of like 3+ years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. And that's not going to be something which anyone is going to be motivated to then say that this person or any of these persons are pedophiles, right? So the substantive age gap benchmark for determining pedophilia is just a retarded position right there, because guess what? Right now, you're going to have the burden to determine if it is the case that outside of your own subjective theories about the matter, there was a substantive age gap between me and whomever I was dating. And that's something you can never actually, because there's no objective benchmark that we can utilize for saying that, hey, this person is actually a pedophile if there is a 2 year age gap. So the first two definitions gets debunked if your own concessions on the very fact that they do not reflect the concept. And the last definition that you have provided after conceding in the first two definitions now has a vagueness problem, a vagueness objection. There's a semantic vagueness objection so far. Given that definition, we have a vague concept of what the term is pedophilia, but clearly in the real world, given linguistic ages and their intuitions, we do in fact have a clear, non-vague concept of pedophile. So which one is it? Is it going to be the case you could see to the vagueness problem, which is going to be something which puts you in a position where you're unjustified in claiming that I'm a pedophile, or are going to now drop this definition again and see the definition and move on to the definition? Which one is it?
No.
Oh yeah, somebody unmute West, bro. Oh my God. All right.
Yeah, okay. Apollo, do you want to conclude? First, I hedged. That doesn't win you the debate. I already gave the age gap. Given the conditions provided, actually, I'm not gonna help you. I'm not gonna hand on this. Again, I clearly described what pedophilia is. I set some standard for what determines this thing. There's nothing vague about it. I need you to give like some sort of argument for it being vague. I set the conditions. The conditions were very clear, very very succinct. I explained exactly what determines this thing, and I appealed to multiple. Actually, well, the judge heard it, so that's besides the point. Substantive
Okay.
age gap. Yes, I explained. I already explained what it was. So if you already didn't track that, we can completely conclude on this debate right now. You just lost. And by the way, wait, Judge, can you not don't help him track I, this
Yeah, I
guy's
got
just not
you.
understanding what's going on.
Okay. Westbound's
Please make
unmute.
those.
Can someone? Yo, Tam, you're actually fucking useless and you should cut this off, bro. Honestly.
Yo,
Yo,
Yanni,
I'm
you're the
putting
Yes, so
on
furthest.
Westbound, go
fucking
back and mute,
PC.
bitch.
Kill your.
So anyways, just to be clear, a couple of things. So, he did the dumb fuck debate strategy stage 7, I think, which is when you just call for conclusions because you don't actually have any means of responding to the actual argument. Even people like C who is in the chat, who doesn't even fuck with me like this, is literally telling you not to go to conclusions because you've addressed jack shit. And again, we heard your definition. The third definition that you've given after conceding the first two definitions is just say that what the term pedophilia is there being a substantive age gap between both relationship participants. Now, substantive, right? That word right there, the reason why that's vague is because there's nothing about the definition of substantive which would make it the case or which would rule out a 2 year age gap relationship from being something which is going to be non-substantive in the sense of what you're talking about. There's nothing about what the word substantive means that would rule out the relationship that participating in from being the type of relationship which would not qualify as a pedophilic relationship given your definition. And given the fact that we cannot point to any particular content of the semantics to rule this out or to not rule this out, then that means there's an indetermination problem. It faces an indetermination problem insofar as we have to remain agnostic on the proposition given your own definition currently. Unless you provided further clarification on what this particular concept would actually be, maybe you're going to want to define substantive as just 2 years and above, and that's going to seem as if it's going to be question begging. It's going to basically be you committing a definist fallacy, where you try to define the standard into the definition, even though the definition of the word substantive does not actually bake in that particular standard. That's the only way you can escape this. If you don't want to use that dishonest tactic, which I'm going to expose you for and just like blow your brains out on that particular point, you'd have to then agree that the current definition is also something which is conceptually useless, and then you'd have to be pointed to another definition which requires a third concession and a third hedge and a third modification of the definition, and so you'd be particularly fucked at this point, right? So that's basically it. Right now, don't claim that I've not addressed anything because I've clearly addressed the points I've mentioned. All the points I've mentioned, actually. I forced you to concede twice already. So I just wanted to let's lock into the conversation, give a more clear-cut concept of what it means for something to be substantive, because, of course, we've seen plenty of case scenarios in which parents, right, our parents in the real world, there's like a larger age gap than 2 years, right? For example, my mom and my dad has a 4-year age gap, but no one calls my dad a pedophile for dating my mom. That's retarded, right? No one's gonna call my dad a pedophile, or no one's gonna call your
You
dad a
sick
pedophile for
fucking
dating
freak.
your mom, who is like, for example, I know it's funny because this is just a ridiculous argument, right? There are plenty of scenarios which there's even a 10-year age gap or a 5-year age gap between parents, and they're not going to be criticizing any of the parents, right? So this is just a ridiculous argument, right? You have to be very clear cut and very precise on what you mean there, because given your current definitions, again, vagueness objection, and you're not doing anything to actually escape from this rat trap you're actually in right now. So just give an actual argument. Don't try to run to conclusions because you don't have an argumentation to respond to the actual points here. Give an actual argument, and from there on, I can respond to it.
All right, Westbound, go ahead. All right, Westbound, go ahead.
Okay, that's all right. Listen, that's not why I called for conclusions. I can't believe I have to say this again. I set some gauge using these real world examples. I gave an example, and the current definition literally fits under that standard. I gave 3 different things that we would value, and the thing that you brought up to, I guess, bring it some sort of ridiculous, or I call it absurd, the parent age gap thing. Again, that just works to some sort of proportionality. At that point in their life, they've experienced a much bigger difference. So like if I guess we could say like that's only 5% of their life. Meanwhile, when you're like 10 years old, you're like double the age of someone that's 5 years old. So that gap would be much more present when you're younger. When we speak about like things and referring to them exponentially. Um, Next, it also doesn't even follow under the it doesn't even fall under the conditions provided to be pedophilic in the first place. So it's not analogous whatsoever. It's only under the conditions that I provided, using the gauge from society and the real world examples, that somebody would be a pedophile. So it's not just one condition being fulfilled that somebody magically becomes a pedophile. It's some sort of combination of these things, and I clearly laid this out. If you cannot track this, that is completely your problem, Paulo. Again, I would like to push for conclusions here, and it's not because you know, like I can't respond to anything you're saying. It's just you are not tracking the argument. You are not tracking the arguments. So very simple. Uh, uh,
Are you done?
the
Okay.
the next thing I would like to go on to. Hold on, wait. I just want to get a little bit rhetorical there. The next thing I want to go under. If you wanted like something that is extremely rigid, uh, again, you haven't given any like counterexample that what you like you made this claim that, oh yeah, we have these other examples that are like extremely rigid. I'd like you to give some sort of justification for that. Give me some sort of counterexample, like some other things that we would prefer that would be rigid and explain these concepts to a detail that you claim that my argument doesn't hold up to, right? Next, I guess I would just say that mostly when we look at this word, or when we look at this concept described, uh, I would even argue, and I do think that I gave justification for why we would have some sort of calculation. But even if worst case scenario, this is the case. I don't see why we need a super rigid like why this is some necessary thing. Why this just like why something that is accurately gauged or why something that can fit under this context, relatively speaking, can't just apply here, right? Because if it was like some super, distinct scenario, some super analytical, we really have to go in on this and look at what we're talking about. This may be 17 years old, 16 and 364 days. Maybe that's fine. But again, this, like, whatever age gap you just provided would be uh just something that would fall under this general gauge completely, just completely fall under it. You were 18, 19 at the time, or you claim to be 18 at the time, which I'd like for you to prove. You agree that she's 16 at the time. You claim that there's some sort of 2-year age gap within that. Again, that more than falls under my conditions. So yeah, we can conclude.
Yo, somebody unmute Apollo, unmute Westbound, please.
Yeah, so
I just
I'm going to highlight because this guy cannot keep his arguments consistent, actually. So just to point out an issue with the schizo, right? So he talks about, well, oh, she's 16, so that more than satisfied my condition. But Westbound, was you defending the Aisha marriage in the chat the recent day? Like, Aisha was 9, right? And you defended that. You said explicitly that you don't think there's anything wrong with that relationship or that marriage, even though she was 9, given the fact that it is the case that you appeal to social constructs. And then you try to make an argument historically based on the fact that her agent thing starts from puberty, which is unjustified. But even then, your whole argument gets shattered by your own beliefs. I don't know who's playing that. Someone kick that, please.
Give me 1 second.
Waiting for someone to get the bot. Do. Okay, good.
Alright.
So to continue with my argument, right? So there's an inconsistent belief system, right? So this guy over here, and this, by the way, I don't have any issue with marriage. I'm a Muslim myself, right? But I'm saying that how we determine whether someone is a pedophile or not is if they're dating an adult. And adulthood is going to be determined based on maturity, a conjunct of psychological and physical maturity. Physical maturity is marked based on puberty and the end of puberty, and psychological maturity is going to be shaped by cultures and societies, etc., etc. That's how we determine if someone is a pedophile. Age is a predictor for determining if someone is going to be mature or not. So so in the actual current day, if someone is like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, of course they're not. It's definitely that they're not going to be mature for these sorts of like conducts or sexual conducts, right? Or if they're like 13 or 14. But then it becomes a bit blurry when it reaches like 16, for example, or even 15. Because we see like not like a for 15 years old be something which is you could say legible for relationships, but we see countries like in Europe, plenty of European countries, the age of consent there is like 15 years old. One of these countries being France, for example, and there are a plethora of countries actually worldwide, whereas the age of consent there is 16 years old. So that argument doesn't really work if you want to talk about the intuitions of people, because there are plenty of intuitions which does not converge with your intuitions with respect to what pedophilia actually is. So that's going to be the better definitional standard for determining pedophilia, not what you're saying. You're talking about why is the case I have to present necessary. The reason is because if you rely on your current definition, it basically faces the vagueness problem, as I've said previously. If I just say that what is substantive is a 1-year age gap, right, then that's going to define an 18-year-old dating, like, let's say, a 17-year-old as a pedophile, and that's going to be retarded, right? Of course, determining if something is substantive or non-substantive is going to be agent relative. And so you have to cash that out. You have to basically clarify and hash out the concept before you make like a strong determination on if it follows from this concept that someone would in fact be a pedophile. So yes, that's the reason, in case you did not track it the first 3 times explicated on this, dumb fuck. Now, to address the other part of what you're talking about there, right? So you have yet to actually demonstrate what qualifies as a substantive age gap for there to be some dishonest or some morally bankrupt power dynamic between the relationship participants. You have no explication on that either. So you're really just a double binder. You don't have any argumentation, and plus you've even opened your legs to the facts of you conceding definitions that you presented on more than one occasion. You have yet to even refute it. You actually concede that you have in fact conceded on more than one occasion in this conversation. So you're really not looking good on the optics or on the rhetoric. And please stop saying in your sentences. Articulate your points. Like how I'm articulating my points
shut the
right now.
fuck up.
Or stop stuttering. So, nigger, shut up. Watch your tone. Now, Westbound is
Yeah,
Someone
my
got to
bad. I
control
thought you
these
were
two
done.
black nigger slaves who's interrupted the conversation. Holy shit, dude. Or maybe I have to do it myself.
Okay. So
Westbound, my son, need
this
my
seems
speaking permission, okay?
okay. Moderation. Thank you. Something very simple, right? First of all, you're a Muslim. I don't know. Do you think this is like supposed to help your optics at all? It's very, very
You fucking
embarrassing.
retard.
Um, One, right? Okay, that was like 2 weeks ago. I could have changed my mind. Two, I didn't even agree with it because of like some sort of maturity thing that you're outlining. You're trying to say that I inherently agree with your beliefs. I actually said that she wasn't 11. I actually, or 9. I actually held the claim while I was defending it in chat that she was actually 18, 19. And I would also like for you to prove that I had some sort of agreement with your, or my beliefs were in line with your ideals. Within this interaction, right? Again, age is the gauge that we set uh, as a society for the brain, psychologically speaking. So if you want to counter it with these different intuitions, that's completely fine. With these cases that you appeal to, usually they have a second age barrier. And set some sort of I guess initial age of consent in which these people you can have sex at 16, you can have sex at 16 to 17, but you cannot necessarily have sex when you're 18 with a 16-year-old. There would be the secondary age gap provided within that situation. Anyway, uh, just on top of that, this still doesn't address what I said earlier about the dynamics. There's a lot of arguments that I've made that just went completely unaddressed. Right now, you want to talk about just purely what happens with the age situation. I gave many contingencies. We can conclude on this because you've just like been completely lost on this conversation. Um, and outside of that, right? I just like to make this very clear for you. I don't care what you think is retarded. You can say, "Oh, one year age gap is retarded," because you can't clarify. You can't. What did you say? You can't clarify the concept and talk about how it like manifests in reality or something like that. I gave a very clear gauge as to what we can use. So if you want to use this real world, or you want to use this real world explanation, or you want to use this I guess uh, this gauge or this measure, such as psychological development, maturity, physiological development, that's completely fine. Again, you'd have to satisfy you literally appealed to society as some sort of gauge for this. So again, like the basis of this is just the same as mine. There's no type of inclarity, or there's no type of lack of clarity being presented there. Clearly, if we're using the same measures, or we're using the same things to justify these points, then it's just going to follow that we would hold these beliefs, or we would have these we would hold these beliefs to be true within each other's worldviews. It's just all about consistency and what we consider to be mature, what we consider to be psychologically advanced enough to have sex with somebody who is much more developed than you. You didn't speak to you didn't respond to the proportionality point. You didn't respond to a lot of things. We can conclude.
So, as his dad, I gave him a rhetorical pro tip, which is to stop stuttering and be like, and he kept on doing the same thing. I can't even help this kid anymore, actually. Just, he doesn't have the confidence anymore. He doesn't have the composure, but that's fine. It's expected. So claiming that something is clear is not proof for it being clear. You're just saying it's clear. That doesn't prove jack shit. You dumb freaking retard. You have to give an argument as to why it would in fact be clear, because this is the burden that you have currently. You're the claimant. You're the affirmant. You're the one who's making the claims here. You're the proponents here. You're the one accusing me of being a pedophile, right? You listen to how I talk. I just take the pro tips of how to articulate yourself like this. Okay, so with that being said, you're the one who's the claimant here. So you have to demonstrate as to why your definition is clear, especially if I grant the conceptual clarity you're trying to establish here within your semantical framework or landscape, you moron, you idiot. Right? That's something which you have to understand before engaging in these sort of debates, which you have not understood and you still haven't understood yet in this conversation. Right? So you've not proven that claim firstly. Secondly, I've demonstrated as to why, again, substantiveness, just something being substantive, given the definition of the word substantive, is open to several different things being substantive. You can say a 1 year age gap is substantive. You can say a 2 year age gap is substantive. You can say a 3 year age gap is. You can say anything is substantive, anything really, right? So that's not an argument which works that well. You have to basically have a more qualification. If you add more qualifications, then that's you admitting to the definition presented currently being a conceptually impoverished definition, and so you'd have to change your definition again for the third time, which would be the third concession, actually. And so that's going to be a bad look on you on the optics, just making that really clear. There's not really that much to address because what he does is he does the retard thing, where he just says a whole bunch of yapping, a whole bunch of like jibber jabber, nothing which is worthy of responding to, a whole bunch of gobbledygook. And then afterwards, he ended up by saying, we can conclude. And then after saying that, he then attempts to use rhetoric and then stutters over every single sentence and word he attempts to communicate in the conversation. So there's not really that much to address except the clarity part, to which he has not given any justification for. And so the points that he has mentioned is not even worthy of addressing except that part which I've already debunked and demolished. So Westbound, you got your rhetorical hole stretched apart in the conversation in front of 50 plus men. And yeah, this is just a bad look, man. I mean, you gotta lock in. You gotta lock into the conversation, respond to the actual points, and do better on the rhetoric and articulation because you look bad right now. You unironically you're at the sub Rizhan level on rhetoric right now. You're at the sub Rizhan level. This is a bad look. So respond to the points, get some rhetorical amps, and lock the fuck in. Spawn retard.
I already explained why it's clear. Like my whole argument was to build on clarity. I gave justification for this. I already gave a gauge for what's substantive. You're going circular on this. We can actually just conclude this here. You actually just lost.
Yo, Westbound, you suck.
Oh man, dude, you got me. What a great argument. Oh man, oh man, I already lost. My God, dude. Anyways, so Westbound, give your conclusions, and then afterwards I'll give my conclusions. Okay, since you don't have any actual counter arguments,
Responsible.
You're not giving conclusions.
We don't have to do conclusions. We can just let the rec speak for itself.
You said let's conclude. You
Yes,
want us
by
to
let's
conclude.
conclude, I mean
You
let's
said
end the
we
debate.
can
If you want to
conclude.
give
You
conclusions,
said
go ahead
we
and
can
give
conclude.
conclusions.
Okay, so I'll conclude. I'll just give my conclusions.
Go
Since
ahead
you
and give
don't
your
want to conclude,
conclusions.
okay?
I don't care.
So
Oh
good
my
boy.
God, is that
Relax,
Mortified's graven
son,
announcements?
son,
Or
son,
Mortified's mom's graven
son,
announcements? Holy
son,
shit.
son,
Holy
son,
shit.
son. Good boy. Now I'm going to give my conclusions because you said you're not going to give any conclusions. All right. So my conclusions of this debate is quite literally that my opponent is a low tier. He's one of the lowest tier orangutans I've faced in my entire life, actually. And I'll explicate as to why this is objectively and undeniably the case, right? So the first parts of the conversation comes in him saying that what qualifies someone as a pedophile is just being attracted to minors, right? Then I ask him, oh, well, given that definition, would you be a pedophile because you're attracted to minors in the past? And then he concedes on this definition, changed it to a second definition, and the second definition was being attracted to minors if you're 18 or above. So then I said, okay, so in a case scenario in which you're attracted to someone who is 17 years and 364 days old, and you're 18 and you're 2 days older than this person, would it be the case that that person is a pedophile? He was like, let me just change my definition again. So he changed this definition again to the third definition, which is substantive age gap, which would qualify or which would basically motivate some morally bankrupt power dynamic between both participants or both partners. With that being said, sorry for this because I have a cold. With that being said, I basically pointed out the things of this. He has to add extra qualifiers or extra qualifications to this new third definition after conceded the first two definitions for it to be in the proper standard or in the proper status to make these sort of claims that I'm a pedophile, which he has not done. Right? Given that particular definition of what it means for something to be substantive, it is not the case that you can rule me out as someone who is not a pedophile. You cannot be in any justified position to make this claim. Your position has no merit whatsoever because of the vagueness. The vagueness results in indeterminacy. Indeterminacy results in lack of justification. Lack of justification results in you having to concede that's your proposition, your claim. All the pontifications they've been making is unjustified. And so, the point I'd like to mention is simply that you're cooked. You cooked yourself numerous different times, and that's just the argumentation aspects I want to mention. Let's just focus rhetoric. The rhetoric was far more confident, far more composed, far more articulate, far more eloquent. I'll just rhetorically mocking him while he was just stumbling and stuttering like the stumbling Steven he actually is. And the derailed donkey tried to force conclusions, and now we're on conclusions, and even other conclusions. I'm pissing all over his face for all the Apollo haters and all the deriders of Westbound to witness
is
and
wrong
cry
with
in the
you?
fucking background. And so my conclusion is done, and then you can respond. Actually, no response because the debate's finished. I'm gonna end the recording. Here you go.